Good day and welcome back to another exciting episode of Logistics with Purpose. We have an amazing guest today. Kristi, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. This is a conversation you've been anticipating for a while, so I'm excited to learn more about our guest and his background and your commonalities.
I'm really happy. And before we jump into our guest today, and I'll let you introduce him, um, one positive thing that has happened to you this week, Kristi.
Ooh, I'm in a new place. I'm visiting Vancouver Island for the first time, and it's really beautiful. And unlike where you are in Atlanta, it's nice and cool.
Yeah,
I
starting
still
to
have
get
my house
really
shoes
hot
and
here.
jacket on.
Really hot. Well, and without further ado, go ahead.
Oh, well, what's yours?
Oh, my one positive thing? Well, today's my son's birthday, so I'll
Oh,
wish him
that's
a happy
cool.
birthday, and we're gonna go watch Argentina play in Copa America tomorrow.
Oh, all right. That is a good one. Well, thank you again, everyone, for being here. We are excited to welcome today's guest, Joe Davis, Managing Director and Senior Partner at the Boston Consulting Group. He is also chair of the BCG Center for Inclusion and Equity and North America Regional Chair Emeritus. And not only that, as if he didn't have enough to do, he is the author of The Generous Leader. So, Joe, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Enrique. Thanks, Christine. Thanks for the introduction.
Thanks for being here, Joe. We're both very excited about this interview, so thank you.
Yeah.
Likewise, likewise.
Before we get into your illustrious career and, of course, your book, we're not going to let you get away without talking about that. We wanted to start off with just a couple of questions to warm all of our brains up. So just respond with the first thing that comes to your mind. So what is one thing you're grateful for today?
I just was holding my 8-week-old grandchild 10 minutes before we started. That was very
Wow.
wonderful. And he
That's
was smiling. It was really cool. So I'm very,
fantastic. And what is your favorite hobby?
my favorite hobby is gardening. I love to garden. I have a big garden here at our home in Minnesota, and it's like a secret garden, I call it, again, for my grandchildren.
Oh, wow. And what is one thing you wish you could change about the world?
Now you're getting heavier. I
Yeah.
guess, you know what, have you heard the word perspective taking? I wish each of us would maybe spend a little more time listening to the other's perspective. You don't have to agree with them, that's okay, but at least listen and try to engage with where they're coming from. I think everything would be, much more positive.
Yes. And what's a skill you'd love to learn and why?
Um, wait, piano, I'd love to learn, but just for all the reasons that are obvious, you could just sit down and play it almost anywhere. And I'd also think it's time to learn Spanish, but that one I think I can do. Piano may be a little hard.
Oh, still got time.
Yeah,
And what is an underrated leadership skill?
underrated leadership skill. I guess it's also overused word, but I do think the power of vulnerability and authenticity, or being honest and being real. You pick the fancy words or the simple words. I think that is critical and either underrated or scary. You pick
Mm,
your word.
terrific.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those answers. We really appreciate that, and I think it has given us a little bit more information about who Joe is. Before we start with your career and all the amazing stories that you have from your time at different companies and then BCG, of course, what is something about you? Like, can you share something about you, a little bit of your background? Where did you grow up? Some of the childhood experiences that kind of led you or started building the base to then the career that you had.
That's a big question, Enrique. Building the base, I don't know. I mean, my childhood, I do actually, I grew up in California, then Seattle, and actually maybe on a wheat ranch. My mom, dad got divorced young, which probably did also build a little bit of who I am today, because the resilience that I mean, you can go two ways, but I went the resilience way, not it just, happened. It didn't pick it. But we spent a lot of time on the ranch and the wheat ranch. Actually, that's, and my mom, there were 7 of them. It's a good Catholic Roosevelt family, and 6 aunts and uncles, and everybody would come home for the harvest. The men would be all out in the combines, and the women would cook. Sorry, it sounds very traditional, but this is 50 years ago or 60 years ago. And that was actually probably quite forming, just to see the family together and bonded and connected. the power of connection was probably important to me, especially after I think about it, the divorce. Those aunts and uncles just swooped in as, additional parents. I mean, I could go on and on about my childhood, but that's
Are
fun.
you, what kind of things were you harvesting?
Wheat,
Wheat.
Walla Walla, Washington,
Oh,
which is
okay.
now a wine capital, not like Napa, but it's a very hot wine market now, wine area.
That's
Nice.
amazing.
Joe, are you a 49er fan?
Yes, yes.
All right.
We played a game at dinner the other day, and it doesn't matter, but like your three top athletes, Tiger Woods, Joe Montana, and then Willie Mays, who, we just saw passed away actually. So Joe Montana doesn't quite get Tiger Woods, but he's number two.
And whether it was on the wheat farm or somewhere else, is there something, maybe it's the story about your parents, but is there something from your early years that you can look back now and see how that kind of helped shape you as a person or shaped your career?
Yeah, I have two quick stories I'll tell. Maybe I got married this is about vulnerability and actually how it isn't so scary. I got married when I was 23. I cried through my vows. My wife was strong and clear as a bell, and I couldn't get 8 words, and the minister had to say the next 8. I was so embarrassed. 23-year-old guy, you're not supposed to cry up there. But I'll tell you, the number of people that came up after, oh, that was so wonderful. You could feel the love in the church. So, and then the second story, not so pleasant. That one was pleasant. I was 30 when my mom passed away of cancer. And there, the 3 boys, my 2 brothers and I were up there to talk. And this time you can imagine all I did was sob. I didn't even get a word out. And the priest said, well, it's okay, Joe, because tears are the fountains of love, which was very powerful. And guess what? Again, people came up to me afterwards. Oh, to see the emotion. So, I think there's many experiences in our lives that you don't know at the moment it's shaping you, but it can. And just the reinforcement of showing emotion when I was 23 and 30, and the positive report, I think that led to a lot of my ability to be more quote unquote vulnerable than one might be.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that, well, until when I started to write this book, actually started talking about the book, but I had kind of dissected, well, why did you do that? Why do you do, you start to think these things through and realize, oh, those are probably very powerful moments. But those are 2 that are very powerful for me.
Any mentors or heroes early on, Joe? I'm sure you had plenty with a big family, and it sounds like you guys were all very close, and you had a great family support.
Yeah, well, mentor. I mean, it's so funny. I mean, I don't. Hero is a big word. As I said, I had 3 younger. They weren't younger for me, but they're probably 25 to 30 younger uncles who were always around and very, very helpful. And so they're probably were heroes because they're also helpful. Then I got a high school teacher who I really liked. I think when you don't, my dad was in California, I was in Seattle. When you're not raised with one of the parent figures, I think you probably attract to that, a person of that gender.
Right.
And a high school teacher who meant a lot to me and very committed and just would, kick things around and talk and all that. Then I
Anything
don't want to go all the way,
particular?
but go
No,
ahead.
anything particular that he told you, or like some quick suggestion to how to go about in life? Or
Yeah. Wow, you're really making me search back. I'll tell you, I'll tell you, I'm just going to tell you what it was. Actually, he was gay. And what he taught me was acceptance, and this was 1963 or something, or 65. It was it was a long time ago. So I don't think he ever said anything, but he didn't completely hide it. And, I think therefore indirectly there was, acceptance was something he taught me. And I've never thought of that before, Enrique. You just pulled that out.
Well, thank you so much for sharing it. Very, very powerful. And thanks again for your vulnerability, because that's something that's definitely going to help us grow as well through your experience. Changing gears a little bit, you have a bachelor's degree in economics, graduated from Whitman College, obtained an MBA at Harvard Business School, both very prestigious institutions, by the way. What inspired you to study economics to start with, and then business, right? Coming from your early kind of story of how you grew up to like, well, wait, I want to be in finance and economics and business.
Um, You guys
What
really
happened along the way?
you make dissecting questions. You know what? Actually, interesting. I have a feeling. I know this for a fact. I think I was interested in business from very young. Now I'll tell you another young story. When I was in fourth or fifth grade, I'd go buy toothpicks and I'd soak them in cinnamon and I'd sell them to the other kids for 10 cents each. And they cost me practically nothing. And I kept thinking, and then, the other thing I'd do, I'd go up to the Kmart, it was Kmart at the time, and buy big bags of Tootsie Pops, which I, 50 for $2, and I'd sell those for 5 or 10 cents each. And I used to think, basically,
That's pretty good.
I know, and I used to say, what suckers? You could go up there and buy them too, like what's wrong with you people? But it just showed bring the product to the market, and they'll buy at the right price. I had a paper route from 6th through 12th grade, if you can believe it. I had 2 for a while, morning and afternoon. People may not even know what a paper route is. That's where someone delivered a paper to your front door. And I also I was a restaurant person from 16, the day. So I think
Wow.
what drove me to do all of, I don't know, we had no money. We were single. My mom was a school teacher. I think probably I liked a little pocket change in my pocket. Then you ask, economics. Well, I'll tell you, I knew I wanted to be in business. Whitman is a liberal arts school. There are no business classes. Economics, the closest you get. So, and, given what I just described, I always assumed, not always, probably from age 18 or something, that I would probably go to business school. You're going to get into some business school, but I happened to get into, at least a good reputation of one, a very good one.
Yeah. And probably wanted to move beyond selling toothpicks and Tootsie Pops. So you needed some more.
I sure did.
It's fantastic. You also worked in companies like Proctor and Gamble, huge, well-known global company. How did that shape your work career and your journey and your interests and what happened next? So tell us about your P&G years.
Yeah. Okay. There's actually several things. There's a theme I'm starting to notice myself. So I was a sales rep. I was selling shampoo and toothpaste in grocery stores. To be honest with you, that was very humbling. I had and I remember my wife used to say, come on, P&G, you just want to get promoted 1 or 2 times. It was one of those kind of places. And then it opens up doors for it. And I thought later, how did she know at 24 years old, I should get promoted 2 times at Procter and Gamble? But one shaping was, it was very humbling. There was no question. The other thing actually is interesting because P&G as a sales rep, you are taught to engage with, to listen to try to understand what's in the store manager's head at the moment, so you can connect with it. But I'll tell you, then one other story that was very powerful at P&G. I got promoted 2 years and was a manager of 4 sales reps. 3 of them were career reps. One was a fast track manager type. And I used to ride with the career reps, but I wouldn't say much because they were 40 or 42. I don't know. They seemed like old people. I was scared to death. What does some kid know to tell them? So one guy, I wrote his review at the end of the year, and I wrote everything he didn't do by the book, because what did I know other than the book? Yeah, and I started reading all these things to him, reading the review, and he said, Joe, he stopped me. He said, what the heck? He might have said a different word. He said, you ride with me every 2 weeks, and you've never told me any of this feedback. What is going on? Well, I can't remember what I said. I was embarrassed. But afterwards, very powerful, and this has been very forming on this concept of feedback. When he left, my boss said, never give a review again where the person doesn't know every idea and every bit of feedback. They would have to have heard it before you write it down. It was very powerful for me. And it's, we all talk about giving feedback in the moment, try to be direct and try to be clear. And, that's just a classic example of when you don't do that and hide behind the words of the review, and shame on you. So I think the humbling nature, but also that I did tell that story because it's a very powerful story for me at 24 years old, on as much as feedback is scary, you gotta treat it right.
Yeah. So how has that, speaking of the feedback thing, it is hard, it is scary, it is, for some people, it is more so than others. So what does that look like? Do you feel like you quickly got better at that? Did it take a lot of practice? What is that like? As far as feedback, did you get good at it?
Well, yeah. Well, you use the word practice. Actually, yes, Kristi, it takes practice. Actually, I remember at BCG, we used to have, when you get promoted, start to get feedback, we would have sessions where you practice. Even if it was just role playing, but it was still scary. So, time helps it get better. But I will say a couple things on that. I think one can give direct and clear feedback if a couple conditions are in place. First, you gotta develop a relationship with whomever the people you're working. Just like recognize them along the way so they know they're human, like they're people. Then we all hear about strength-based development, but spend the time to learn someone's strengths and the areas they have to work on. When you bring a relationship of some level of trust and then help them think through how they're better by also playing on their strengths, you can get away, it's a funny word, you can get away with being direct, be clear, maybe even be hurtful sometimes if it's coming from a place of them actually developing. Now, did I learn all that from that P&G thing? No, it took time, it took experience. When you're a younger person, like I was, you're scared to death to give feedback, either because what the hell do you know? Or you're afraid the person's gonna not like you or give you bad feedback yourselves, or whatever. But it's not a very productive way to run anything.
It's great.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You and I share the common thing that we both worked at the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. That's also where I met my business partner, Brian Oxley, and a good friend. And it was a great school for me. I enjoyed it. I always worked with very dynamic and smart individuals, and I had a blast. Can you please tell us a little bit more about kind of your experience at BCG and where you ended up having an outstanding journey of more than 35 years, I believe?
Yeah, well, yeah, 37 years. So I hope I liked it, which I did, and I do.
It sounds like you did. Yeah.
Obviously, I
It
did. It's
lasted
funny you
more than
just
the
use the
average.
word school. You just use the word because you call it BCG school, but to many, and I talk to alums a lot who talk about the learning. I mean, talk to a person that worked one summer at BCG like 30 years earlier, and that person, well, and this is not a pitch about BCG, but it's the greatest summer of my life. I learned so much. So it's been obviously an incredible run. Um, I just got into BCG coming out of business school. I hadn't heard really of consultants. I grew up on the West Coast. I wasn't the East Coast. I call it all the fancy schools where everyone went to Goldman or McKinsey or BCG. Got a summer job. It was an incredible experience. I think a couple things kept me there. The one thing that appealed to me, and it sounds cliche, but the whole idea of variety. Because at P&G, I did notice every year now it's time to sell shampoo, Head and Shoulders, because now it's dandruff season. Now it's time to sell. So after 7 years, like, oh, we're doing the same thing over and over. Now, P&G is a wonderful place, and it was a great job, but then as time went on, Enrique, 2 points. Obviously, BCG. Well, I'm going to say this: BCGers are full of very bright and nice people. And that's a nice combo. The other thing I think, and I learned when I talked to different executives, all of them talked in their as more senior that there was twists and turns in their career that may not have been where they wanted to go. Someone thought he was going to be the head of his country, and instead he got the head of a business unit across Europe, not the business unit he wanted. So it was a better job actually, but he didn't want that job. And he commented on the twists and turns that come along. And for me, BCG. I mean, clearly I've served clients the entire time. That's what we do. But I also had the opportunity to open offices, open businesses, et cetera, which for me, when I talk about the variety, it wasn't just, the client variety, but actually different roles, which I believe at the end of the day, that and the people kept me for 37 years.
Well, and you had a really successful career. You were in charge of opening a couple of offices. You got a chance to travel. You were, I think, CEO at one point for North America.
Well, yeah, we call it head of North America, but I like the title CEO, sure.
It sounds better to me.
My son said, Dad, of course you were the CEO. Just say it. What the heck? What's the big deal? And other firms call it the CEO, yes.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So anything that you learned, I mean, you must have learned tons and tons of things. And of course, we could fill like a couple of episodes full of BCG learning experiences and stories, but anyone in particular kind of doing some things for the first time? Because it seems to me that throughout your very successful career, you also got the opportunity to do a lot of things for the first time that no other BCGer had done. And I'm just wondering why did they choose you for that job, and what did you learn from it?
I can do like 9 learnings, so I've got to pick one for you, Enrique. Maybe I'll rapidly pick 2. I'll tell you one thing, and Kristi, it goes back to what you and I were just talking about, feedback and recognition. I got a lot of great feedback along the way that might have been tough, but about understand your strengths, Joe, and leverage them. When I got my summer full-time offer, this is funny. The person that gave me a job said, "Oh, Joe, you'll do really well here because we all speak with really big words and you don't use such big words. You can connect better with the client." So clearly that was a put down for me, but it was about your ability to connect. And I had another, maybe 4 years in, a mentor said, if I put you and another person in a room, four walls, no way out unless you solve the very, very difficult problem. The other guy will solve it every time. He's a very smart BCGer. You probably won't get out of the room. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
But he said, when you get out and I ask you to get it done, you will get it done 100% of the time. The other person never will. And the point was, you are able to collaborate with people, surround myself with people who have talents I don't have. So that's probably, a lesson is listen to the feedback or whatever, pick up on your strengths and leverage the heck out of them, because none of us are good at everything. Actually, none of us are good at many things. So the things you are really good at, make sure you take advantage of those. I could go on and on, but that's the one I'll pick of a lesson. Because I think it made a difference in Enrique, your question, all the different roles. Because I switched the role, I said,
Right.
okay, how am I going to do this role? How am I going to team with? Who's going to help me get it done? Because I don't know anything about this role. I think, maybe not the first office because I actually helped open it and then ran it. That wasn't so hard, but I think that's a key thing is when people give you feedback, look very hard for the kernels of your strengths in there, even if you don't like the other part of the feedback and grab them.
No, it sounds incredibly logical and reasonable to me, and just all about people and culture. And we're getting closer and closer to talking a little bit about that. So I get excited, but no, I can totally see why they picked you for those incredibly hard and challenging tasks, because it's really about the people. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you have always been good around people, and you're a good team player. And
Yeah. We got to say though, because sometimes people have said to me, "Oh, is it all, rainbows and unicorns and fluffy clouds?" And sure, but it's actually, you have to as a leader, you have to drive outcomes, right? If you don't get outcomes, you don't get to stay in the job. So it's not going to matter. Now, what your point is, in most things, outcomes come by teaming, working with the people. Not many people are totally single practitioners. Maybe some inventors pull it off, but even then, someone's got to turn the invention into a thing, right? A product, and market it, and there you go. Now all of a sudden you need people.
That's fantastic. Well, I want to dig a little bit further, go a little bit further down that path and dig into your experience some more. So in 2011, you were also recognized as one of Consulting Magazine's top 25 consultant for excellence in the public sector. That's an incredible achievement. We're talking about BCG, renowned for its expertise in solving complex business challenges and driving towards enhanced performance and a competitive edge. So given your experience in North America, around the world with strategic consulting, is there something that stands out as a particular challenge that you worked on that you also had learned a lot from, either before, during, or after?
Yeah, so it's interesting. By the way, this is not meant to be a BCG pitch, but thank you very much for the kind words about the firm that I worked at.
You were with them for 37 years.
Right.
I know, but
it has to be a big chunk of
I'm very
your career.
conscientious of that. There's many great places. I think one thing I'll tell you is very early on, I can think of two challenges. One, in my career at BCG, when we were actually just a strategy consulting firm, meaning do a study, 8 weeks, kind of leave the slide deck behind and hope they could figure it out. Now, it wasn't that hard. I'd be a little harsh, but it was a lot of, whereas now most of the consulting firms, I think everybody, actually tries to engage and help get it done. But I remember it was my third year and we did some work with a client, and the client said, not to me, to the partner, said, "That's great. Now go do it." He said, "What do you mean go do it?" He said, "Well, we don't know how to do it, or we would have done it. We needed you to tell." They said, "Well, we don't do things." I mean, not quite like I'm being a little glib, but so that was early on in my career. We actually had to make sure we helped the client get it done, which was this was 30 years ago. It was very unusual for consultants. And of course that's hard because now you've got to, back to the point, Enrique, work through the people, and we're not even working there. So you really have to work through the client. You have to engage in what are their challenges and how are they going to overcome those challenges. And you're only going to be measured by results, not by a brilliant study or brilliant insights or brilliant ideas. So that was, I mean, I don't, when you say particularly challenging, it's probably challenging because we actually had to deliver the results. Now, we spent a year and a half doing it and worked out just fine. So I don't, but that was quite unusual. And that, I think, is one reason I stayed at BCG so long, actually, because I'm more of a doer than, I told you the story about the white room. So I'm more of a doer than a white room solver.
And for the managers and C-suite listening, again, given the different types of projects that you worked on, are there commonalities that people should be listening for right now to say, hey, we're headed in that direction, or we're dealing with that same thing right now? We need to look into getting help or making a course change or something along that. Are there anything that came up as commonalities and common threads in those projects?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah, or maybe I'd say common kind of learnings across them for me. I think there's a very important thing, and you mentioned the C-suite too. I think, and you started with what, I said perspective taking. I mean, really, I use a phrase, engage the skeptics and uncover the no's. And, rarely are the noologists actually true blockers, maybe one out of 1,000. Most of them know something about whatever idea. So if you're a CEO that wants something done, and people are down there saying, no, it won't work, sir or ma'am. Well, they know something. They're not just a pain in the neck. Actually, probably never. They know something you don't know. So I think this is quite common if you're trying to get something done. I mean, if you're dreaming, maybe not, but is really is uncover, find the people that are not so sure whatever it is going to work and find out why, and then solve that with them. Which has a lot of things underpinning it. Make sure you listen to people. Make sure you ask. I can go on and on kind of the traits I think a good leader should have. But that's one commonality. If I think of everything I did across my career, even with, I watch clients who are damn good. They're always, well, okay, you say it won't work. Why not? What's wrong? What's wrong? Why isn't it going to work? What do you need to do differently? What do we have to change? I think it's quite powerful.
Yeah. You also lived through a lot of experiences during your career that were life-changing for a lot of us. The dot-com crisis, 9/11, the Iraq War, the Great Recession, most recently COVID-19, all extraordinary circumstances, a lot of unpredictability there. So how did you and your team begin working in times of crisis and leading companies through things like that largely seem out of our control?
Yes. Ooh, okay. Well, I think a couple of things. The first thing, of course, I think of any time of these, whether I was in leadership role, some of my, 9/11, well, actually, I wasn't leading the firm, but the first thing you want to do is form the team that's going to help you tackle the problem, whatever that is. And I'm going to use a word actually, and I think, you want that team to be as inclusive as possible. And I don't mean just diversity. I mean, well, I need a junior person. I need someone from this department. I need someone from that role. Because those people are going to have, you bring that kind of collection of views from across your organization, you're going to have a much better handle on what's going on. That's number one. The other thing I think is then you do have to engage with and understand where people are coming from. And because a lot of, Enrique said the people, a lot of those crises, sure, you had to figure out how to serve the clients and make sure the business stayed, but you also, at least in my business, make sure the people were not going to quit and or not so overly stressed. You can go on and on. That's what you want to do, because if people remain quietly confident or boldly confident, I don't care. It makes a big difference in those moments. So I learned that through a lot of these, just engaging. Remember at COVID, someone said to me, and I was head of North America then, our CEO, as Enrique said, like laughing over that one. Joe, you don't understand. You're 30 years at BCG, big house. And I actually interviewed. She said, you got to talk to people out there. And so I talked to a first-year consultant, second year, and he was on his bed. And I said, what are you doing on your bed? He said, well, Joe, I have a bedroom, a living room, and a kitchenette attached to the living room. My wife gets the couch one week, and I get the bed. Then we switch, and that's our place. That's probably well, it's probably smaller than my bedroom, probably, you know, back then. So it was very powerful though so that's the other point. First, build a team that's inclusive across roles and insights, engage with people rapidly. Then I think the other thing is this whole humbleness or calmness or whatever. I mean, I remember Scott Kirby, the head of United, told me during COVID, he said to everybody, "Hey, I don't know where this is going. I'm not sure when we're flying again. I know a lot of you are furloughed. I'm not sure when you'll get your job back, but I'm here for you, and I'm going to make sure you get it." And he said his C-suite said, "Why are you telling him you don't know?" He said, "Well, because I don't." So that was an easy one because nobody knew, but they were all afraid. Do not show any weakness as the boss. You have to have the answers. And that would be exactly the wrong thing at that moment. Now you have to have the confidence to say, I don't know, but we're going to make moves. And if they're wrong, we change our mind. But to, you know, just to hide behind, I got all the answers, all those crises, you know, some of them lasted 1 or 2 years. I mean, not the 2008 took a while to come out of. 9/11 took for BCG 2 or 3 years to come out of. Now COVID, we came out in 3 months. I mean, because everybody was at home. So everyone just started working again. You know, it's kind of different. There you go. That's a long answer. I'm sorry, Kristi, but you got me going.
That's a great answer.
Well, and Joe, I'll start my next question first by quoting you. And you mentioned at some point, inclusion isn't just nice, it's necessary. You've been a key part of the advancing the BCG's diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. Can you delve a little bit more into how BCG's inclusive culture and emphasis on diversity have contributed to not only BCG's success, but then how that particular strategy has helped companies around the world? And you briefly mentioned it on this last example.
Yeah, no, and you know, there's that word inclusive can mean two different things, right? I mean, inclusive, I just talked about making sure you have an inclusive team, but there also is inclusive of diversity, which is what we're saying here, and people of different backgrounds, different lived experiences, different colors, genders, you know, we can go on and on, which at least for BCG is critically important. Yeah, you know, I think that, you know, there's so much data done by the banks, done by the consulting firms, done by schools about when you have the most diverse team, you do get better answers, you know. And actually, there's a lot of analysis by the banks about the performance, whether it's stock or EBITDA or whatever, when you have more diverse, in particular women, because that's what is more studyable at this stage in the C-suite. So there's plenty of data to prove it. I think, you know, whether BCG proved it to ourselves through data, I think we knew if we're going to crack tough problems and help move organizations, it can't only be white males. Now, we might have too many white, I mean, you know, it's got to be a set of diverse people that are working with a diverse company. I remember a pitch once, Sharon Marcel, she's currently head of North America. We were making a pitch at Fannie Mae, and I was a senior person. I was sitting right across with the client. She went like that and moved. It was a big round table. And I said, "What?" She goes, "Well, look across." You know, she didn't say that, but look across the table. The leader was a woman. She said, "I'm sitting across from her, not you," which was very smart. It was very insightful. Oh, right, we got to represent. So I think for BCG, we understood the importance of it, and then data over time. I mean, if we're going to hire all the people we need to keep hiring, it can't. You know, we need. It's just all the different work groups. So that's you know, as a global firm, I think it's pretty important too. Obviously, I mean, obviously it's by definition. So I don't know that I'm not sure I exactly answered your question, but
No, this definitely helped, and you did that for a while. So thank you for sharing that insight. Do you have any specific starting points for how companies can create a more
yeah.
inclusive workplace? Because I mean, you mentioned a little bit about the hiring and paying attention to people, but is
Well,
there,
yeah.
because this should not be an issue anymore, right? Yet we still talk about
Yeah.
because you're right. There's so many studies about how this helps companies that it shouldn't be an issue, yet we still don't get it right, I don't think.
Well, it's you know, it's interesting, Enrique. You just made me think of something. When I was running North America, and I was biasing, I'll be very clear, I was biasing my placements in leadership roles to women, to people of color. Now, they had to qualify, they had to be deserving of it. I mean, it wasn't a free ride, no way. But someone, a good friend of mine who was a white male, said, "Well, Joe, am I ever going to get a chance?" And it was a tricky question because there was a lot of white males. So, you know, maybe there's just all these people that are eligible, and some people, and it was so I could be critical of the backstepping that I see, and you could have commented, but also if you think about that question of me, maybe to the point about listening to someone else's perspective, there might be a little bit going on there. So I think, to your point, I think the first off, as a company, I mean, you do have to believe there is value in a diverse workforce. If you just don't, I don't know what to do, Enrique. And sure, there's a lot of studies, read them. I do think you've got to care a bit. I mean, you don't have to, but about the value of helping those who have systemic challenges. Just maybe you don't have to. Just believe the numbers, but the numbers also say it. There's also, depending on what business you're in, huge markets that are completely untapped by you if you're focused on the traditional consumer. So then I think the other thing, is this whole idea of leaders have to role model, and you have to role model as a leader. That you're accepting diversity, we're bringing diverse people into the workforce, into your table, etc. So the other thing I think is important, as best you can, you do get leaders, a diverse set of leaders in roles, which I think most companies try that, even if they don't like all the, the woke stuff going on one way or the other. I think at the core, most leaders trying to build a diverse leadership team. I think that's pretty critical. That I was thinking the other thing to do, well, this is harder, is be public if you can. I mean, BCG's got a very public report on, all of our diversity networks, our numbers. And I remember the CEO is also my friend from business school, said, well, Joe, if you put all those numbers out there and those targets, you're just sticking the next person with it. I said, yeah, that's exactly the point. I mean, if we're going to keep ourselves honest to pushing to be better, now that's a big step, and that took us a lot of years too. So that's not where I'd start. But man, you start to go public with your performance, your behavior changes. We know how that is,
Absolutely. Great advice. Well, I want to move on to talk about your TED Talk, which was a lot of fun. Passing the Super Bowl is what it's called. So you talk about bringing the 50th Super Bowl to San Francisco in 2016, and actually used that event to give back to the community, which seems like a revolutionary idea. And you mentioned the positive social impact, sustainability initiatives that you pioneered. First, why? Why did this even matter?
Oh my. Well, you can already tell I'm a pretty honest person. So I think there wasn't just, my idea. It was a team of us, the host committee, or at that time, the selection committee, the bid committee was called. Once we won as the host committee. I mean, we wanted to win. Let's be clear. We wanted to have Super Bowl 50 there, and you needed to. So there's two things going on. One, the bid committee chair is a guy named Daniel Lurie, who's actually running for mayor of San Francisco right now, who ran a nonprofit charitable organization called Tipping Point, which is modeled after Robin Hood in New York, which is the board basically funds all the operations. So all the money comes in, goes right to wherever it needs to be. So you see a little bit, he was the chair. It also, you needed an angle because, I mean, well, I said this in the TED Talk, so it's fine, but the owners want to go to the place. They want an angle for why they're selected. And you could see, a lot of it's Miami, New Orleans. I mean, these are places where you can throw a great Super Bowl week party, to be blunt, and a good game, and the weather's going to be nice. I mean, there's a lot of things. So we needed some angles, and this idea of giving back to the community, partly driven by Daniel and partly driven by a different pitch from probably what Miami or New Orleans was doing, was quite powerful. So the group believed it, and to be blunt, it was beneficial.
Yeah. And what were some of the results and impact that came out of that?
Well, so I mean, a couple that I know once we got the bid, so that was nice. I think the other angle on that was also we said we'll be most technologically advanced Super Bowl, which tied to San Francisco, right? Then the host committee in the NFL, I believe, were more thoughtful about the organizations they hired to do all, there's a lot of, the contracts or whatever. They were thoughtful about making sure it was a diverse set of organizations. There was a lot of, there was funds that were fundraised that were given channeled back to the community. I mean, when you say the word impact, the sad thing is a lot of these things, you make a step, but it's a long ways till, you know, the wave hits. It's just like, yeah, it's like, but at least the impact of money was channeled and jobs were, you know, were not biased, but were, you know, given to groups of, you know, of less opportunity, were two of the things that were made sure happened.
Well, and congratulations for that. Very,
Thanks.
very well done, and a great Super Bowl as well. So
Yeah, it was a good game too, you're right.
good game, yes. Well, and with all this experience that you've had and all different things and people you've met, in April this year, you launched your book, The Generous Leader: 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain. Um, one, what prompted you to write a book? I feel like that's very interesting. I know that kind of like rounds everything up that you've said and you've mentioned. You put in one single book, but then the book in itself, it's inspiring leaders and CEOs to really recognize that outcomes as being productive are important, but then the intentions are usually coming from generosity, and that's something that's surprising from someone that's done like strategy consulting and the
Yeah.
economics and finance. I mean, your
Look, see, even
background.
I'm labeled. He's labeled me already. Look at that, Kristi.
I know it's I'm just really trying to understand because I really share this with you. I culture and values and being generous, I feel like it's a really, really good competitive advantage at a strategic level, right? So you're not trying to be nice for the sake of being nice. It's like
No.
if you are nice and good and honest and purpose driven, then you will be successful. So tell us a little bit more about your book. It's a great book. You just launched it. Tell us more because we would love to hear a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, well, you said, okay, so I mean, I am with you there. I do, you know, I think a generous leader, and you could call it a servant. There's a lot of words one could use, right? But I do think, you know, what I now actually got this tightened in my own head, which is someone who gives of themselves freely without expectation of personal benefit, so others can develop, grow, and thrive at their full potential. And now, so you do that, and everyone's thriving at their full potential. Obviously, there's going to be indirect benefit, which means your team's going to be performing better. Your team performs better, you perform better. It's almost obvious, right? But it's funny. And you mentioned, so that's, you know, that's really what it's about. I have 7 traits, you know, I probably had 12 at the beginning, and when you work these things down, so you can pick that I do believe are indicative of being more of a generous leader. And as I said, we said a minute ago too, this doesn't mean it's only nice, and you said it too, you still have to drive outcomes. You don't drive outcomes, you don't get the role. The other thing I was gonna say, Enrique, is it's not just, you said CEOs. I mean, you can be me at 24 years old as a P&G. Just think if maybe I would never read the books, people don't read books, but just think if I'd read the book and thought about giving feedback, I'd still be scared to death. I sure would be, how do you do this? But I probably would think about it a little more than I did. So it's not just, you know, it can be for, I think, people moving into roles. One last thing I will say, though, it's interesting as I've thought about it more, you know, someone who's a brand new leader, maybe has a team of 4 versus a CEO. It's actually a lot easier for a CEO to be a generous leader because they know they have 0 chance of getting it done unless they do it through people. Because their organization, unless they're a single shingle CEO, it's just too big. Whereas if you have a team of 4 and the team screws up, you could probably stay up all night and do it yourself. You know, so now all of a sudden you have a problem because you're going to go just the opposite way. So that's actually, I think there's more learning or more challenges to evolve, and you know, time is part of it. But you know, just understanding the power of working through people. Now, I don't want to go on the whole book, but I just think now one other thing I'll say is, you know, people, because work life is blurred so much, technology, COVID, the whole thing. I mean, you're at home, you're where, you know, in Vancouver, house sitting, you told me, or dog sitting, you know, we're not just in offices every day, that the thing's blurred, that people need to be and want to be seen as a human. You know, the day of IBM, white shirt, blue suit, cog in the wheel, I'm this person, I'm that person, they're over. That's not gonna, you know, not gonna win the day. People want to be seen as human, and the leaders have to bring, they have to recognize people as human, and they got to bring some of their humanity. Or you mentioned the word a minute ago, you're gonna have attrition, and attrition of the best, and you can't afford attrition of the best. So there you go again, long answer, sorry.
No, this is perfect. And you mentioned 7 traits. I mean, there were 12 initially, now 7.
Well, yeah, I don't know, 12.
I don't need you to tell us each and every single one of them, but if you could expand a little bit and maybe give us 1 or 2 characteristics of what you think generous leaders should
Yeah. So, well, there's 2 that I think are, as I've talked more and more about this, fundamental, and a third one that's critical and doable. They're all, so I think the whole importance of perspective taking, of what I'm going to say, asking and listening. Google did a study of 80,000 of their managers, which tells you how big Google is, doesn't it? And they said, who are our best managers? The best managers, it turned out, best performance, and the teams liked them, all that, were good coaches. And why were they good coaches? They engaged. And what did they do to engage? They asked questions and they listened. That's what everyone said at the core. So this is, to me, being a generous listener is what it's titled in the book, taking the time to understand what's in your head, Kristi, that you know that I don't know. And then actually incorporating that in, not just ignoring it. I'll tell you a funny story of a client once. It's actually, I know this logistics, this is not a supply chain story per se, but it was a supply chain executive giving a presentation about where he wanted to go to his CEO. And it was a BCG project, but he had done he was presenting it and doing a lot of the work. And he was going down a path in his story, and the CEO asked a question that came in from the side. It's fascinating. He looked over at the CEO. It wasn't on track to his presentation. He kind of paid lip service, made some comment, and he went back to his presentation. And I watched the CEO, his eyes glazed over. He didn't listen anymore, because that person didn't take the 30. Oh, sir, I don't understand why you're asking that when I'm going this way. Oh, sir, what do you mean more? Tell me more of that question. Not very hard to do. And in that case, he lost the person upwards. I mean, it's also, if you're a leader asking, well, Kristi, how do you feel about this? All of a sudden, Kristi said, oh, you actually care about how I feel? Oh, you actually respect me? Very powerful. That's a long answer to that one. That's important. We talked about vulnerability and authenticity. I think it's critical. I mean, I won't go in, people, well, let me go just, we all read about the mental health challenges. There's just a lot of uncertainty, maybe anxiety, and people get blocked in their own way themselves. The minute a leader, any level, says, hey, I'm blocked too. I'm stuck too. Oh, you're stuck too. Oh, we're all stuck. Oh, let's just get unstuck together. It's so freeing. And it's not easy. I'm not arguing that. And so those to me are the most fundamental, because, actually you have to be somewhat vulnerable to ask and actually listen, right? I mean, just even that's a simple vulnerability. Then the other one I'm just going to say real quickly, this thing about the idea of small acts have a big impact. And I mean something as simple as thank you for a good job, or congratulations on awesome. Send an email and copy the whole team. I had a person at BCG told me, I love it if I'll say something to my boss on a Thursday, like, oh, I have a big weekend. My son's got a big soccer tournament. It's just an 8-year-old soccer tournament. It's a big deal for them. She said, if the boss on Monday or Tuesday said, how was the soccer tournament? So I'm just more devoted to that person, because and that takes, you got to remember, so that's a little bit of work, but that took like 4 seconds. How was that tournament? Oh, it was great. Thank you for asking. So it's a little teeny thing. I can name other, but you all get the point. And those are easy and really powerful.
Yeah.
Someone was telling me the other day that she had a client, and the CEO every Friday writes 3 thank you notes to somebody every single Friday. Just sits down, and what does that take him? 10 minutes, maybe. It's just a habit. He probably has a canned note even, right? Changes the name. No one cares. I say happy birthday to everybody that works for me. Now it's thousands of people. I just send an email, and the subject line says happy birthday. They get the same note 4 years in a row, but they say, oh, you sent your note 3 days late. What happened? So you don't have to write a novel. Sorry, I'm kind of lecturing here. So
No.
those are 3. Listen and learn, show some, be vulnerable bit. And then an easy one to do is make the small acts that show someone you respect and care about them.
Wow,
Before
that's
we
very powerful.
wrap up, I want to ask about vulnerability. That is, I think, the hardest one for people to practice, no matter what level in the company they are. And I think it probably gets harder the higher you climb as well, much like your United example. It's somebody saying they don't have the answers, they don't know. That's incredibly difficult. And usually probably takes some steps, much like feedback, to get to that stage where you feel more comfortable in that. So As we wrap up, talking again to those in leadership positions, whether it's, managers, C-suite, what is a step or two they can take in the next couple of weeks to just practice vulnerability to become more comfortable with it?
Yeah. Actually, I think it's probably easier as you get more senior because you've got the experience. You make mistakes, you admit it. It's actually, now, not everybody, you're right. I've seen CEOs who say, oh, you can never be wrong. Okay. Okay, I think, first off, let me just say, you do have to understand if you can be honest, be real a bit, you're actually enabling others to do that, to free themselves from being blocked. So it's a gift for them. It's a gift for you because your team's unblocked. So, and then, one thing, two ideas. One, if you're, and I know, I say step over your line, and everyone's line's in a different place. If you're a white male, 42 might be one place. You're a black female, just getting in the business world, it might be a different place. I'm not naive, of course, and you got to be respectful of that. Two ideas. One idea is, if you're afraid to just be a little bit vulnerable, think about a time where some vulnerability happened, you expose a bit of yourself, think back and, oh, it worked. I mean, for me, those examples I gave you where I cried. But if you actually track back, oh, you know what, and look what happened. Oh yeah, nobody thought I was a lesser person. Actually, people, so go find a couple of those and grab that and say, oh, that moment sure, it hurts, but actually that's what I think of, and then just take a chance to step over the line a little bit, man. I don't know what, I mean, I had one other leader at BCG who said he's afraid to say, I don't know. And he would never say, I don't know. And if you could tell the team is about to ask him something that he didn't know, he'd kind of leave the room before that's not very productive. One time he said, well, everybody, I don't know either. Oh, you don't know? Oh, none of us know. Oh, wow. Well, and it just unleashed everything. He said, oh, that wasn't so painful. So maybe find a place to step a little bit over a line. One other piece of advice, someone told me, watch, if you see other leaders being vulnerable or show a little bit more about themselves than you might have, watch them, how'd they do it? You don't have to do their style, but what was the reaction? I bet you the reaction of the crowd, whoever that was not negative, There
Great.
you go.
Joe, thank you so much. It has been a masterclass. For people that are listening, I would strongly recommend getting the book, Generous Leaders, the Generous Leader, 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain. And again, thank you so much for sharing the time with us today. It's been great. If people want to contact you or contact BCG, what would be the best way of doing it?
Well, those are two different things. Me,
Right.
I now use LinkedIn quite heavily with this book, and I actually go read those messages. And if they're not someone trying to sell me something, I respond to them. I'll usually give you my email and then connect by email. I don't want to stay inside LinkedIn. Or you can learn more on joedavis.com, but I'd rather you just send me a message via LinkedIn. BCG, I don't know. You just go on, go on the website and call it off.
The website's a good starting
I
place.
think the website for BCG.
Very good website for that. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, terrific. Hopefully people will not only listen once, but listen several times, because there's a lot for people to pull out and unpack in this episode. So thank you for your insight and your wisdom and your time here with us today. To everyone who is watching, thank you for joining us. We thank you for your time and appreciate you. So please subscribe. We'll have another great episode in 2 weeks, and we look forward to seeing you then. For Logistics with Purpose, this is Kristi and Enrique. Thanks.
Thank you.
See you guys.